Hi, I'm Pete and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. Our piglets are ready to be weaned. They're 4.5 weeks old now. I've been feeding them grain on the floor when I feed their mom, so they've already started making the transition. In this video, I'm going to show you how we pasture pigs, how we set up the fence, what the fence specs are, the shelter we provide in the pasture, and how we feed and water them. So stay tuned. To provide shelter while the pigs are in the pasture, we have these huts. And they're ramshackle affairs. They're built out of black locust fence posts, and they're on skids so that I can tow them around to wherever they're needed. Black locust is great to use for these because black locust is one of the most rot resistant woods that there is. It's clad with plywood scraps, just pieces left over from other projects, and metal roofing. The pigs tend to tear the hut up over time, especially the plywood side, so I just replace them now and again. The big thing that pigs need when it's warm outside is shade. And there's a lot of trees in this pasture, but we also have this shade structure that's built out of half of a 1,000-gallon fuel tank, and my dad welded this up, and the pigs will lay under it when it gets hot. We build pig fences out of 6-foot T-posts that I cut in half with a chop saw, and then we run hot wires at about 6 to 8 inches above the ground and 18 inches above the ground. The posts are spaced 12 feet apart. We've never had a pig go through this. Well, there was one time, but I'll get to that later. We keep the fences super hot. They're powered by the same fence charger as our livestock fence. This fence is running about 8,000 volts now. When I first put them in, just like with the cattle, I knocked down all the weeds with a weed eater, and the fence is as hot as it'll ever be. It's important to put ratchet tensioners on the fence because the wires are so close to the ground that if they sag much at all, they're going to come in contact with the ground and then ground out the fence. So the idea behind the wire height on this fence is it's at snout height for small pigs and then growing pigs. And they'll come up and they'll root by the fence, and pretty soon they'll come into contact with it, get a really hot zap right on their snout, which is really sensitive. And then after that, they remember where the fence is. Unlike our cattle, we don't move the pigs once they're in a pasture. This pasture is big enough so that they have enough area to root for the entire 5 months that they're going to be in here until they go to the butcher. So instead of moving them on and on like some folks do, we rotate pastures. So this pasture is getting used this summer. We'll go to another pasture the next summer, and this one will get a 2-year rest before we put pigs back in here. The next step is to take the piglets from their mom, and mom gets upset, as you can imagine. Come on, Mom. There's some food in there for you. Come on, lady. There you go. Now, before we move the piglets, we board up the front of their hut so that they'll stay in the hut for the first couple days after we put them on pasture. And the reason we do this, and we learn by experience, is that we want the piglets to view the hut as their home, kind of their home base to venture out from. When we open that front of the hut on the 3rd day, the piglets will slowly come out and start to explore the pasture instead of taking off and running straight through the fence. And this brings me to the story of our nomadic pigs. A few years ago, we were short of piglets, so we bought 4 Berkshire piglets from a farm near here, and we'd never been to the farm before. Well, we showed up on the day to pick up the piglets, and it turned out they were raising the piglets in an old dairy barn with no windows. It was pitch black inside. The only way that we could see the piglets at all is the farmer had a flash on his phone and he kind of shined the light on them. But we loaded them onto the trailer and we brought them home. We backed the trailer up to the pasture fence, and I got into the trailer and dropped the pigs in the pasture, and lickety split, 2 of them took off running, went straight through the fence and never stopped until they reached the swamp across the road from our house. They disappeared into the swamp. Hillary and I were still in sneakers, but we ran into the swamp after them, and we looked and looked around. We got covered with brambles and burdocks and chased those guys around for about 2 hours. There's so much undergrowth in there, you can't see a thing, and there's a million places for a piglet to hide. So sadly, we gave up. Here's the road, and here's the swamp. Once the piglets got in there, we were never going to find them. Now, over the next couple days, we had numerous piglet sightings. Our neighbor, who lives on the other side of the swamp over here, saw the piglets in his yard, and he made me a little nervous because he likes pig roasts an awful lot. Then we saw them in the ditch by our field on the other side of the road one morning. And then, on a morning when the kids got on the school bus stopped and honked because the pigs were crossing the road. There was not much we could do. We're not going to go out and catch them at that point. Those guys could run. After about 3 days of this, we went out to the pasture here one morning, and there were all 4 piglets eating in the pasture. I guess they missed their mates and came back home, or maybe they got kind of hungry and preferred grain to swamp weeds. But in any case, it all worked out fine. In hindsight, these pigs were raised in a black barn, no light at all. And here we go, we load them into a trailer, we bring them out and we drop them into this sunlight-filled pasture. Well, what a shock. No wonder they took off. So we learned our lesson from that, and now whenever we move pigs out, we lock them in their hut for a couple days, calm them down, get them used to the environment, tell them that that's their home, and then they can wander out from there when we open it up. In that case, when they venture out from their hut, they move slowly across the pasture, and they slowly come up to the fence, and they get zapped and learn that the fence is not something to touch. If a pig is running flat out, it'll go through any fence. I don't care how many hot wires there are. So the pigs need to be calm in order to train them properly to the electric fence. As far as feeding and watering pigs on pasture, we do it differently for summer batches than we do for winter batches. We'll start these guys out on slop, which is a mixture of feed and water, and that's more like mother's milk. It's thin and they'll be more used to it. And then in a few weeks we'll switch them to dry grain. After those few weeks on slop, we'll be feeding them grain out of these cut off 55-gallon drum ends, and we'll set up the 55-gallon drum nipple drinker in this field, drive 3 T-posts around it, put some straps around it so they can get clean water whenever they want. Getting the piglets on pasture means one more spring job is done, and there are so many piling up now. We're really busy. The weather's changed and everything needs to be done. I hope you're having the same beautiful weather that we are. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.